Is their job to write letters for you?
Yes. Back then, a lot of people couldn't read and write. It was quite different from now. Later, more and more people learned how to write, and telephones became common. Sending letters turned into a thing of the past. In fact, that job probably doesn't exist anymore today. It used to be that when someone wanted to write a special letter or write something that was hard to say, they'd ask a doll to do it.
Okay, retro go. Let's go.
Hello and welcome. Welcome and hello. This is Wait, You Haven't Seen. It's a show where we talk about movies, and specifically, we talk about a movie at least one of us has never seen before. I'm your host, Travis, aka TV's Travis. This is episode number 307. And our movie this week from 2020 is Violet Evergarden, the movie. And here to talk with me about it, because this is what he wanted me to watch, it's Joseph R. Joe, how you doing?
I'm doing great.
Excellent.
I'm doing real good. The question is, how much did you cry during the movie?
Okay, so we're going to get to that. We will definitely be getting to that exact thing. But what I want to know first is, you brought this movie to me. So what is your history with Violet Evergarden, the movie, the series? Because we'll kind of get into where it started and all of that. But what's your history with this?
Yeah, so I've loved anime for a very, very long time. And my wife doesn't have quite the same history as I do.
Okay.
And so I'm constantly looking for things that anime wise that I think she would like. And one of those things that came across was Violet Evergarden. And I had heard a ton of great things about it and how wonderful it was, but I knew based on the clips that I had seen and what I had been told, it wasn't a ton of action, that it was more a heartfelt story, and I knew that my wife would absolutely love it. And so I was like, hey, let's watch this together, and let's do it. And so that's really what it boiled down to, is we were looking for something to watch, and I said, hey, let's try Violet Evergarden. It's got a series, and then it's got a couple of movies afterwards as well. And yeah, no, it's I knew just from the clips that I wanted to watch it.
Mm-hmm.
Even regardless of the story, which the story is phenomenal, the animation was amazing in those clips that I saw. And I'm like, any studio that spends the time to get that quality of animation is very sure of the story.
Yeah.
Because you see a lot of garbage anime that they don't care about the story or the animation. They're just pumping stuff out to get stuff out there, and it's very clear from the animation how much they care about the story.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was like, this is going to be something that I really love, because you can feel all of the emotion, not just in the storytelling but in the animation, and it all comes through really well. So
Yeah. So I will say, to start off, I knew zero about Violet Evergarden before. I'd never heard that name before you mentioned it to me as, hey, we should watch this one. And you even said, it's not really action oriented. It's more of a character piece. And I was like, that's cool. I'm down for that. And so rather, with something like that, where I have like no prior knowledge to it, one of the things I kind of like to do is just go in blind. I want to take the movie as it is, as somebody who has no background to it, because I could watch the series, I could read the books, or, do some Wikipedia reading and IMDb reading and all of that ahead of time and have some kind of an idea. But odds are, like back in the day, I would have had maybe a trailer to watch and that's it. So I wanted to go in blind. So any criticisms I give to this movie are going to be with that in mind, that I had no clue what I was walking into.
well, and I'm glad that you took that perspective, because I mentioned on Wise and Nerdy to Charles that I was going to be coming on here to talk to you about it, and he knows that there is a series beforehand, so he asked me if the movie was standalone enough, or if you had to have seen
Mm-hmm.
the series beforehand. So did you feel lost at any point?
So what I will say is yes, I did. I wonder, I kind of had I had this idea of, okay, it's going to be anime, and that was pretty much what I went into it with. So, that can mean anything, right? Cuz anime, a lot of people will use that as a genre, but it's not. It is a style of
Yep, a
animation.
medium.
It's a medium, and you can tell any story inside of that, and they do tell any story inside of that medium. Um so going in blind, it took me a bit to get my feet under me and kind of understand what I was dealing with in terms of like the world and where we were going and what the story was that was being told was. Um, if I had watched the series, obviously I would probably have a more firm grasp on who these characters were, because there were times where I'm like, wait, what about that character that we met? Oh, I guess we're just going to forget about them. And then they'd like pop up at the end in the wrap up. And that kind of stuff would happen. But I sort of expect that. What I will say is that as just a movie watching experience, visually stunning. The visuals of this were, so I went just recently and saw The Lord of the Rings, The War of the Rohirrim.
Oh, I haven't seen that yet. I want to.
And I went to the theater and watched it, and that is a beautiful film, and it is an anime style animated film, and it is gorgeous. This is on that level, and that was a theatrically released film this past year. This movie, Violet Evergarden, the movie, was on that level in terms of visuals, if not surpassing it. Just everything looked amazing.
Well, and what's even more amazing to the background of that, the studio that made it,
Hmm.
their studio was hit with an arson attack and they lost I think it was 30 something employees the year basically it would have been while they were working on this or
Yeah.
just before they started working on it, because I'm pretty sure that this was the first thing that they put out after that arson attack. um and so it just knowing that they what in the real world they overcame to bring this process to this visually stunning product to market is it's amazing. It's just simply
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah, that was a thing. So I did read that, where it was supposed to originally come out January 10th, 2020. And it got delayed following that arson. Like, that's crazy that they had arson at the studio, and then COVID hit, so they delayed a little bit further. But yeah, just to be able to put out what they did is fantastic. And like I say, just it looks great. Like, the character designs are wonderful, the backgrounds are breathtaking, and there's a lot of really good like vistas and these sweeping looks at almost like, because the main city is it Leiden?
Yes.
Leiden almost sits in a valley, it looks like.
Yeah, it's the port city.
Yeah, it's a port city. So like that just looked great. The Like I say, the character designs and the costumes of these characters are wearing. Like, Violet's dress is just phenomenal, and the boots that she's wearing. It's such a good look.
Yep.
Like, I wanted to go search like cosplay forums to see who's been doing that, because that would make an amazing cosplay. Um
I, I imagine it would be uncomfortable to sit down in with all those ruffles in the
oh,
back,
I'm
though.
sure.
but
No,
but
that's
yeah,
one you
no,
walk around in.
yeah, no, but all of the characters have such a unique look to them, and it really brings their characters to life and tells you a lot about them even before you interact with them.
Mhm.
Because it really especially when you look at Violet with her full dress, long sleeves, the whole getup. You look at her and you think you are reserved, you are refined,
Mhm.
um, and it just it speaks to almost it almost evokes imagery of her being closed up as well, which she is.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah. Whereas some of the other dolls, which you don't see them a ton in the movie, the other dolls and interact with them, but even then, the other dolls have very different um, outfits, and it expresses their personality. For those that haven't seen this, the dolls are um, they call them dolls or auto memory dolls. They type up letters for people because a lot of the people are illiterate
Yeah.
or have trouble conveying the emotions in an eloquent way. So they have the dolls type it up for them. They tell them the message that they want to convey, not necessarily dictate the message, but what the message they want to convey, and then the dolls interpret that into their own style of writing and
Yeah.
and do their best to convey the message in a beautiful way.
Which is a really cool idea that the movie doesn't dive super deep into, but it's a huge part. Like, I guess I should say it doesn't explain. Like, it doesn't go into a deep explanation of what the dolls are or how they work, because there's so the opening with the family. You got mom, dad, and Daisy, and they're at their grandmother's house. She's apparently just passed away, so it's like post funeral um, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Um, and she finds the box of letters, and that's where we get the explanation of like, oh yeah, well back in the day people couldn't read or write very well, and we had dolls that did that. And so I'm thinking, okay, it's kind of a cool framing story that gets us to where we're going. Is that something that the series dealt with a lot, or did the series kind of just stay contemporary to Violet's time period?
It was Violet's time period,
Okay.
basically the entire night. But that opening is a callback to a previous episode,
Oh, it is.
and what most people consider one of the most heart wrenching episodes,
Okay.
where Violet went to visit this lady who she knew she was dying,
Okay.
and um, she had her stay there for I think it was a week or 10 days and write 50 letters to send to her daughter every year on her birthday. And um, it just made me think because I don't know how much you know about me, but I lost my dad when I was 16
Mm,
and my mom in my early 20s. And so for me, that really resonated on how amazing that would be as the kid to get these
right.
letters
Yeah.
every year. And in that specific episode, they actually did bounce forward to see several of those letters and the contents of them.
Okay.
Um, and so in that instance, they did a little bit of jumping forward, but it almost exclusively stayed in the present during the series. And so them opening with that scene really, especially for those like me that have watched it, you're like, oh, you're this is going to be a very emotional movie because you're hitting us, reminding us of one of the most emotional episodes in the series. And so yeah, they really set the stage with that opening.
I was curious about that because we have that opening, and then we go back in time and we get like the voiceover of, who Violet was in terms of what this girl Daisy ended up learning about. And then we start telling that story. And what was interesting to me was like partway through the movie, we went back to Daisy in present time.
Yep.
And so that at first confused me because I was like, well, wait, wasn't this just a wraparound story? Like, what wouldn't we end by, and that's how I met your mother type of thing? And and so it confused me for a minute, but it makes sense if that was a callback to an episode. It's kind of like, so for me, I loved the series Firefly, and then subsequently the movie Serenity. And this acts a little bit like Serenity did, where it is a standalone story. But if you watched the series of Serenity, or Firefly, you get so much more out of Serenity because you have that
Yes.
connection to all those characters and you know everything. And I feel like that probably is the case here, right? Like, you're going to
Yeah.
understand a lot more. Um, but I loved, like, They go back, and the other thing that I feel like I would have gotten more out of is it took me a bit. When I figured it out, it made sense and it did start to give me that emotional weight. But at first I was trying to understand what a doll was because it was only we only meet 3 of them. I think, right? It's Violet,
Yeah.
Iris, and
Well, you meet four, but one of them has retired and is working as a writer.
okay, so she was
So
a doll
because
too. Okay.
yeah, she was a doll and now she's retired and she works as a writer and she has the if I remember correctly, at the end they go to her play.
Yes. Okay.
Um, so
Because that was one of the characters I mentioned where it's like we saw her and then she just sort of disappeared. We never talked to her again, but then we brought in like other different characters, and so um but knowing that there was a series ahead of this, it kind of makes sense then that you're gonna pull some of that kind of stuff and give the people that have watched that series a little something to latch on to.
yeah, and
Um
for those that don't, and I mentioned this to you as well ahead of time, and I love the way that you went in blind with the movie itself to have it in and of itself. But for those that don't want to go fully blind, but also don't want to invest the time into watching the entire series, it's only 13 episodes and or 12 episodes in a special, or 13 episodes in a special. But if you don't want to invest the time into that, they do have a recollections Violet Evergarden recollections movie, which is just it's clips about an hour. It's like an hour and a half long of
okay.
clips from the series.
Hmm.
And so I haven't actually watched that, but from what it sounds like, that should give you enough context to get a bit more out of the movie if you wanted it. So
Well, I can say right now that this is a series that I would just go through and watch. Um
yeah,
Especially knowing it's 14 episodes. I feel like, or 13, 14 episodes, whatever it is, I feel like that's a decent amount to jump into and watch of this particular story, because what I learned throughout going through this is it dealt with there was a okay, so to set a little bit of the stage, there was a war. And in this movie, we get no real context of what the war was about, who was really involved. Like we get bits and pieces in terms of like nations, but it was basically there was a war. Violet was part of that war. Now, in this, all I know about is that she was found by this guy who said she is a weapon and given to another guy. So, they're brothers. It was what's his name? I had it here.
now I'm blanking on the majors.
Dietfried.
They just call him the major.
Well, so his brother is Dietfried, and the major is Gilbert, um, Bougainvillea, and but basically we get like everything with the war is through flashbacks in this movie. So any scenes that deal with Violet in her younger days with the major is all done through flashback. We don't get like scenes of war necessarily. And it's always Violet remembering what was going on.
Well, that's how the series is too, to be
Okay.
honest. Where you only see the war through flashback, and you actually it never tells you what the precipice for the war really was,
Okay.
or anything like that. So the war is more of just a literary tool than it is a main story point, to be
Okay.
honest.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, it's basic because what the war was, it's sort of like basing a movie post World War II, where it's like I was in the war, or
Yep.
and this being a more of a fantasy series, you can just have generic war happened. We were part of that, and we're not so much concerned about those details as what's going on with the characters post that. But it was just interesting that they never really said it. Although they did say that the island that we end up on towards the second half of the movie, people from that were part of the war.
Yes, on the opposite
Which,
part of the war.
yeah, which did confuse me a little bit that they were so like welcoming of Violet and President, uh, President Claudia, I think is his name, Hodgins.
Yeah,
Um,
the redhead Claudia. Yeah, Claudia Hodgins. Yep.
so So for our story, the present day has Violet Evergarden. She's a auto memory doll, and that again took me a minute to figure out. Oh, these are just people, because when we meet her, she is very cold and very like emotionless, and she has written a song. We learn that she writes. She wrote love letters for a princess. She wrote a play. She writes these things, but she herself seems very cold and very like walled off. And
Yeah, so the whole reason that she became a doll
Mhm.
was because towards the end of the war, the major told her that he loved her.
Mhm.
And then he was MIA. And her whole reason for wanting to become a doll was because she didn't understand what the phrase "I love you" meant. And
Yeah.
she wanted to know what it means. And so she kind of she went about it backwards. Usually a doll is very good at interpreting emotions and then conveying it, whereas she wanted to become a doll to learn from other people's emotions what to get context for what that meant, that
And
he loved her.
it's really intriguing to me because at first I'm thinking, okay, she, is a little cold and whatnot. And then there's a scene where she takes the gloves off and she's typing with robotic, prosthetic hands.
Yep.
And we get a flashback to the war and learn that she lost her arms um, in that. And she's got these prosthetics. But when she takes the gloves off, I'm like, so wait, is she an android of some kind?
See,
Is she sort
I
of
had those same
automaton?
thoughts when I first started watching it too. Is because of her complete lack of emotion. I was like,
Yeah.
huh.
And so it was that thing where I'm like, all right, maybe she is, and that's giving her some sort of ability to like take in the information from somebody and spit out writing. But it just took me a little bit to like get my feet under me and sort of figure out, oh no, okay, she is an actual person. Because again, when you get the flashback of her in the war, she's a child and she's being referred to as a weapon. In fact, I think um, Dietfried even says that she's not a child, she's a weapon. She like he literally
Yeah.
says that line to Gilbert.
You use her as a tool
Yeah.
of war, basically.
And
Because
so that had me
when
really
she's
confused for a bit. 'Cause
yeah,
I'm
when
like,
she starts working as a doll after the war, she's 14. And
okay.
I don't know how long the war was, but yeah, no, she's probably under 10 years old when she first joins the war,
And
the war
so
effort.
when I'm thinking she's some sort of an android or robot, and then I realize no, she's not. Now it gives me this whole different aspect of her in that she went through the war being utilized as a tool by Gilbert, and she was a child and apparently abandoned or orphaned or something, right? Because I mean,
So it really doesn't give you a ton of background on Violet before she met Gilbert.
Mhm. Okay.
Um, so it in the series, Gilbert's brother acquired her. She attacked a bunch of the people that were on the ship with him, and he gave Violet to Gilbert. She didn't have a name at that time.
Okay.
Gilbert is the one that named her Violet. Gilbert taught her to speak and read and write. Like she didn't have any concept of language when she was
Okay.
given to Gilbert. Um
So for all
and
intents and
so
purposes, she's like a feral child.
yeah,
And
100%.
so there again though, that makes it really interesting because she's this feral child, she's bred for war, that's all she knows, and now she's trying to integrate into society afterwards. And we know her as being cold, but she has to portray emotions of these people. So it's like her developing sympathy into empathy, all in the search for trying to figure out what this dude meant when he told her, I love you. Like that was
Yeah.
the spark that started it. And I love that idea that like she doesn't know what that means. She's given these words that she doesn't understand them. And so now she's on this journey to try and figure it out. Because I did read a little bit about what the series was and how it's sort of each episode is her going somewhere and kind of solving a problem through her writing, sort of, that's how I understood it effectively. Like I'm
Yeah.
sure that's very simplified, but
That's basically what it is. And she, um, because she got a couple of high profile letters, she became somewhat famous, and that opened up a lot of opportunities for her. Um, Ironically, one of the the one that got her the most famous, which you mentioned, the letters that she wrote for a princess.
Mhm.
It was actually she helped the princess write the letters herself instead of actually typing them out, because um, she was able to recognize that what the princess really needed was to use her own voice instead of the flowery voice of a doll. So she did help her a little bit, but
which
she facilitated
yeah.
someone else relaying their emotions in their own way.
And it's cool that you bring that up because that happens here in this movie. So partway in, Violet gets she goes to visit the grave of the major's mother because the major's mother has died, and we learn that she goes there every year to put flowers on the grave, or every month, I think it is.
Every month.
It's like monthly she goes and puts flowers on there, and Dietfried finds her there and kind of is questioning about it. And again, at this point, I'm thinking she's like some kind of automaton. um I wasn't really sure exactly what was going, because he seems really weird about her. And then when she goes back, she apparently lives at the postal service, the CH Postal.
Yeah. So originally, what had happened was Claudia Hodgins, the president, and Gilbert were in the army with her.
Okay.
And Gilbert told Hodgins that if anything was to happen to him, that he wanted Violet to be taken care of, and specifically to take her to the Evergardens, which is where Violet gets her last name, to live. But
Okay.
she doesn't want to do that, and she never does live with the Evergardens, even though she took their last name. And so, because Hodgins still felt honor bound to take care of Violet, he lets her work there, and he lets her live at the postal service.
Okay. So, but she gets back there and it's like I'm just going to throw out, it's like a Sunday and the place is closed, but the phone rings. And earlier we had a moment with Violet, Iris, and the other doll, and I can't think of her name.
Catlia.
Catlia. Okay. She was the requisite anime girl with lots of cleavage. Is
Yes, and a low cut blouse.
yes. Um, but there's a scene with the three of them, and the phone rings, and Iris answers it. And the phone is an important thing because we learned at the very beginning that this was a time the dolls were popular and prominent in a time before telephones. And Iris even gives this whole thing where she's like, the telephone's going to ruin our job because people are going to be able to talk to each other and they won't need us anymore. And it's really poignant that then, Violet gets that phone call and it's a kid, it's a little boy. And this was the other part that had me confused at first, was the dolls, like the way they introduced themselves is, I will go anywhere to do, whatever it is you're hiring me to do, type of thing. And that was, again,
Yep.
what made me kind of feel like, is this some kind of an automaton or robot or android? Because they seem very like hyper obedient in their job. Because that's how she introduced herself to the mayor, I think, when she meets him. And Iris even said it at one point. And so I was like, okay, are they people or like what is going on here? But she does agree to go meet this boy at the hospital that he's staying in. And what I liked about that was, this was sort of like it's interesting. This movie has weaving plots, right? Because Violet's story is going on as she's trying to figure out the I love you. And it takes a sidetrack to go meet this little boy who is Eurus. And I love when she gets there and she's talking to him, and then he's like, you hear his parents out in the hallway, and he goes, "You got to hide." So cut away, the parents walk in, and here's Violet just like planked under the bed, just sitting there listening to this conversation go on as the boy like is complaining that his parents just always ask him the same questions every time. He's sick with movie disease, right? Just some terminal illness. We don't know what.
Yep.
But he's sick, and he wants basically Violet. He called the postal service. He wants Violet to write some letters for him to his family because he knows he's dying. And we learn not only that, but also through conversation with his parents about his best friend Luke, who he's kept refusing to have come see him. Which is why it got really, the whole like speaking with their own voice thing gets brought back around towards the end of the movie. So Violet agrees. She's going to write these letters for him. I love her. And this was the first crack where I'm like, wait a minute, she's not a robot, because when Eurus tells her all my money's in that tin over there, and she opens it up and it's just a few coins, and she's like, well, this would buy you 20 characters a letter, I think.
Yeah, something like that. And then she totally makes up that
Yeah.
excuse that, oh no, since you're a minor, we can take care of it.
Yeah. And she even like pulls out a paper with special provision. Kid can't read, and she knows that. So she can tell him it's slightly psychic paper, right? She can tell him whatever she wants. It's gonna say that for him. But I love that, and that was that first moment where like, oh no, this isn't an android. This is a person. She's just stunted emotionally and learning
Yep.
and growing that. So I really like that. So she agrees, and she's going to write the letters, and she's writing the letters for him. And I love the pinky promise that he makes her do.
Yep.
I did, because it's, I can't help myself when she takes the glove off and you see the robotic, prosthetic, when they're doing the pinky promise, I was like, she's going to rip that kid's pinky right off. Like, she's going to get in there and it's just going to snap. Oh no, what have I done? Which, obviously if this was Archer, that would happen, but instead it's a very beautiful moment.
Yeah. Well, and at this point, she has been a doll for 3 or 4 years, so she's 17 or 18 at this point.
Okay.
But yeah, and her character design doesn't really change in those 3 to 4 years, but yeah, it's just hand wavy.
But I like that we get that whole moment, and she writes the letters for him, and then it feels like, well, that story's kind of done. Like, she promises she's going to deliver them, and it feels like a great character moment of, I did this thing for somebody, and she's feeling a little bit better. And then President Claudia is in like the room at the postal service of, here's all the stuff that gets returned. And I love this because this is the trope of right place, right time, where he just happens to be there and wanders by and sees a letter sitting there that he recognizes the handwriting on. Now, I don't know if it's brought up at all in the series or not, but Gilbert must be left-handed, because otherwise there is no way he could recognize the handwriting of that man.
Yeah, it's true. I hadn't really thought about that.
But I love the idea that he saw the letter and he's like, that handwriting, and he looks at it and he sees where the return address is, and he decides he's got to go find out, because they were friends. Claudia and Gilbert were friends. He knows what she thinks of the major and all of this, so he's going to go kind of find out. And I guess she figures that out or intuits it from him or something.
No, I love they completely skirted the trope of nobody telling each other anything. He went and he told her, look, he was very cautious about it, because it was clear he didn't want to get her hopes up, and he was very clear with her, look, this is what I think, but I don't know.
Right.
And
yes.
so he was just very honest with Violet that I don't want to get my own hopes up, but at the same time, I have to know.
Which I love the fact that the communication is there, because that is a big thing for me is communication between characters in stories, right? It would have been very easy for him to just go and never tell her, or to like make up some story or whatever it was, but he goes to her and he does talk to her, And she, of course, is like, well, I'm going with you. Like, I gotta know. I gotta find out.
You're not leaving me behind.
And basically doesn't give him a choice. So he's like, all right, fine, you can come with me. So they got to go to this remote island where this letter was from, in the thought that it could be the Major, who has been presumed dead for the last number of years, right? As far as like,
Yeah, the last 3-4 years, he's been MIA and presumed dead.
yeah,
And the whole time, I mean, my wife the whole time was like, yeah, he's alive. I'm like, yeah, probably. And so the whole time we're sitting there thinking, what's going on with the Major that he's not returning, assuming that he is alive. And so we went through a whole bunch of different scenarios in our own mind. Is it amnesia? Is he a prisoner of war? Like, why is he not coming home? And we did not see, we didn't predict what what was coming at all with that.
no. So the Claudia and Violet get to the island to find him, and the island has basically, it's a bunch of old people, women, and children. Like, all the men left for war and never came back, except
Yeah.
Gilbert somehow ended up there. Only now
Yeah.
he's Gilbert now.
Yes, since that's totally different.
No one's gonna
Gilbert
find
instead
you.
of Gilbert. Oh man. Well, and it's like these people don't know who you are, so I mean, I guess changing your name that tiny bit on a remote island on the off chance that this place that doesn't have phones, like I'm like, you're just so extra about
Yeah.
not wanting to be found.
Yep.
When I don't know, it's just,
It was.
changing your last name would make more sense than just
It really would.
Gilbert.
But they get there and he doesn't want to see him. Like, because when they get there, Claudia's like, all right, let me go in first because he might not even be here. Who knows? You wait out here. And so he goes inside, and Violet, again, to be just like totally leaning into what her character is, she literally just stays right outside the gate waiting.
Well, so a big part of her character and part of the character arc in the series is that she initially doesn't do anything unless she's ordered to. If she doesn't have orders, she doesn't do it. And so a lot of her growth comes from her finding inner strength and being able to give herself orders per se and do stuff in and of itself.
That makes a lot of sense thinking about that. Like, basically she doesn't have any of her own agency.
Yeah. Well, even
Because-
like when she first starts training to become a doll, all of the letters she writes are very succinct and factual, almost like she's writing a military report.
Oh. See, that's a cool detail.
Yeah, and so initially she actually flunks out of the doll school because she is struggling with emotions. And so she's very literal because she doesn't understand subtlety.
Okay, it's Data learning emotions or trying to interact with people early in Star Trek. Like,
Yeah.
Does she say things that can be construed as offensive, but she doesn't understand why it's offensive?
Very much so.
Okay, that makes sense, and it makes sense if she was basically a feral child and raised in the military, and that's all she knows. So now that does kind of help to add another layer to like the way she's acting, because Claudia basically tells her, wait out here, and goes inside, and she literally waits right there and is like, well, we'll stay here.
In the war, he literally was her superior officer, even though they were sort of in different units. He was a higher rank than she was, and now he's the president.
Right.
And so from a militarial standpoint, she's tuned to follow whatever orders he gives, even though a lot of her character arc has her doing things of her own initiative or ignoring people who give her orders, because she does, especially with the brother Dietfried. She a lot of times ignores his orders. but yeah, so her sitting there and just listening and following is very on brand, but it also speaks volumes to her where she is mentally at that point, because she's not asserting herself, she is following orders again,
Yep.
even
Yeah.
though she's regressing just a little bit in that moment.
And you kind of see that a little bit in the way things play out, because as they're getting there, she is, well, first she's reluctant. She doesn't know if she wants to go or not, because she's not sure if it is the major, if he's even alive. Is he going to want to see her? Why hasn't he seen her for the last however many years? Why hasn't he tried to contact her if he is alive? Um, and one of the other, I think it's Catalia, tells her basically, write it out, write some letters, like do your
Yep.
doll thing, but for yourself, and that will help. And but yeah, then she gets there, and again, and it makes sense, right? If you get into if you get into a situation you don't quite know how to act, you're going to fall back on your base instincts, and for her, that base instinct is to follow orders.
Yep.
So, but she does run into some of the kids from the school who on the island who talk about their teacher. Well, first the kid tries to scare her with a praying mantis, which is great, because he does it to the president first. He does it to Claudia, and it freaks Claudia out, and and then the kid does it to Violet, and she doesn't react at all. And he's like, "Wait, this doesn't scare you?" And she looks, and she's like, "Oh, it's a praying mantis." And I love the kid is the one that offers up, like, "Well, yeah, he's only got one arm, like our teacher." And
Yeah.
so convenient that the kid is all about his teacher, but that, obviously triggers for her. And so she starts asking questions. So she's now convinced. She knows it. It's Gilbert. The major is
Yeah,
there.
which
He's the teacher.
is just a tiny bit of a stretch, because the last time she saw him, he would have still had his arm. It was very, very wounded,
Right.
but
Yeah,
he
that's
still
true.
technically had his arm.
Yeah.
So,
But that's enough.
yeah.
That's enough for her to understand it. But Claudia does
But
find Gilbert, who doesn't want to talk to him.
well, and she did dig deeper and got the boy to mention that he was also missing an eye,
Oh, right.
which
Yes.
she saw him shot in the eye during that last battle. So
That's true.
that I think was more definitive proof for her than the arm in and of itself.
Yeah, and so they find Gilbert, but he doesn't want to talk to them. He doesn't want to talk to Claudia at all. And Claudia even tells him, like, Violet's here. She's right outside. And he's like, I don't know. No. I can't see her. And this is where, like, his reasoning is heartbreaking.
Yep.
W-
Yeah, because he felt like he had failed her because he used her so much for war. Now, granted, he was teaching her the whole time to be more human,
mhm.
but
Okay.
he had a duty, and so he still used her as a soldier, even though he was reluctant to use her as a soldier, because he still saw the humanity in her, even though his brother did not, and a lot of the other soldiers did not. But he saw the humanity in her when others did not, and he felt that he failed her in those final moments because she was so scarred from the war. Like, he watched her arms get blown off in the final battle.
Which we do
And
see in the
so,
movie. Like, we get that flashback. We see, because I see him shot at first, and I'm like, oh, that dude's dead. Like, he got shot in the face. But
yeah.
turns out he's not. And then, so that's where we learn that how she lost her arms and all of that. So, but yeah, just, the idea that it was, he blames himself for, for all of that. And that's why he couldn't go back.
Yeah. Well, and combine that with the fact that he's heard about what she's been doing as a doll, because she's become famous
Yeah.
as a doll. And so even rumors have spread to their remote island. And so, just in his mindset, he's thinking she has made so much of herself in his absence, and she's grown so much. Even though he tried to help her grow as a person, he didn't equate that he had put her on the path to get there. and without his influence, she never would have been able to make it as a doll, let alone
Right.
anything, because she was, again, such a feral child. Um,
And
but he
because all of
still,
that all happened after, and he wasn't a part of, or he doesn't think he was a part of any of that growth.
yep.
So, yeah, and that's the
Well,
tough part.
combine that with the guilt that he feels every day being on this island where they've lost all of their men, and he was against them.
Mhm.
These were men on the other side. It's very possible that he even killed some of the men from this island.
Yeah.
So he's feeling the guilt there. He's got PTSD. He sees that Violet is seemingly so much better without him in her life.
Yep.
All of these mixed emotions are going through him while being confronted with his past.
Yeah. And so when she goes to try and see him, because Claudia comes out and he's like, no, sorry, not happening. And she sort of convinces him, like, give it one more try tomorrow. But then she just goes to see him anyway. She like, and Claudia's like, I know where he is. They go and they're knocking on the door and he's just standing inside telling them to go away. And then it starts to rain on them. And this big storm hits. And while the storm is hitting, they also have a telegraph on this island. No phone yet, but they have a
Yep.
telegraph.
Yeah,
And
telegraph in their postal office.
yep. And it just so happens to be that the CH post sent a telegraph because they knew that's where they were going
Yep.
to tell her that Eurus is getting worse and they need to she needs to deliver his letters, and she made that promise that she would deliver those letters. And so she's like, I gotta go. And there's a big storm, none of the boats are leaving, she can't leave. And so we get this kind of secondary plot here, or the subplot of sending Iris to go and talk to the boy. And this was
Well, and not only that, but she was supposed to write one more letter to Luke
oh
or
right,
Luca.
that's right, there was one more letter for Lucas she was supposed to write, and now she couldn't.
So
That's
they
why
were,
Iris is sent. Okay.
yeah, they were trying to get there to write that final letter before he died, because that was part of the promise, was that she would come back to write that final letter to the friend that he had been avoiding because he didn't want him to see him all sickly. He wanted him to remember him being healthy.
Yeah. And so Iris gets there. Now, I'm going to say that coming in with no preconceived notions or no baggage from the series, this scene with the boy in his bed and his family there and Iris and all that, this was what basically broke me in the movie. Because Iris gets there, and Iris is not Violet. They're very different personalities, but Iris is going to help. She's going to do her best to write those, letter for this boy. And you got his whole family's in the room, and the kid can't even like sit up anymore. Like he's gotten more pale, more frail. And Iris, instead of writing the letter, understands and realizes that this boy needs to use his own voice to talk to his friend. And so she sets up getting a phone call patched into the room, a telephone call, so that the boy and his friend can speak to each other in their own voices. And that, given
And this is Iris, who was bemoaning the invention of the
yes,
telephone at the beginning.
yep. So the fact that it's Iris setting that up and going through all of this, and like the other dude that's with her, what is it, Benedict, I think is his name, like runs off to get the kid and get him to a phone. Kid doesn't even know how a phone works. Like he's holding it like, what do I do with this?
Yeah,
And
because
then
it's brand new. Like it shows the Eiffel Tower looking thing that's
yep,
being built, the radio tower. Like that's an ongoing thing throughout the series. Is they're looking at it, they're like, oh, this radio tower is getting built, then we're going to be out of business. And yeah,
yeah. And then that just the moment where the two boys start talking to each other on the phone, I'm over here tearing up and crying. It was the waterworks started because there's so much emotion going on. And you got Iris like walking out of the room and just kind of having to give a big sigh and like understanding that what she did is both the absolute perfect solution to this issue and the thing she's dreaded, because it takes her out of her job and being the best doll that she can be. But
And she makes some offhand comment about, I guess this is a good invention or something like
yeah,
that.
yep.
Something to that effect.
And it just, there's so much emotion running through that whole scene. And then after the phone call, the boy passes away. And so, like, if I wasn't
Yep.
already on the verge of tears, if not crying, like, that just pushed me over the edge and kicked me right in the junk. It was just
Yeah.
heart wrenching. And then she gives the letters to the family.
Yep.
And the mom's reading the letter and the dad's reading the letter, and then the little brother.
The little brother.
And that was it. I was done. I was just bawling at that point because that little kid.
Man, I'm tearing up right here.
He
Just
was
thinking about it.
just like, he was so excited to get the letter from his brother. And when we met him at the beginning, the first time we meet Eurus and his family comes in, his little brother just wants to hang out with his older brother. That's all he cares about. Have him read the book and all this. And the kid, Eurus, is like, go away. I don't want to talk to you. He's just real shitty to him. And
Yep.
and it's because Eurus is hurting and he doesn't want people to see him like that. And he doesn't want to remember.
He's
him that
lashing
way.
out a bit.
Yeah. But then the letter that he writes him of, just take care of mom and dad and live the life that, live life to the fullest and all this kind of stuff. And the little kid just soaking it all up and just all about it. His brother, because in his mind, his brother is perfect. And I just, it's so, it's just a lot. It's a lot of emotion. And then I look and I'm like, we still got movie left. This isn't the end. What is going on? I don't know if I have any more in me. And, but we got to have the big payoff. I mean, Violet's got to have her moment, right? And that was also something else, because the way it all plays out, we don't have, like, we have the big epic moment, but the epic moment is brought about in such a way that was great. Like, he gets a letter that she wrote him. She's on the boat heading back. He gets the letter that she wrote him on this, like, grape harvesting invention trundle thing that he's helped build to get grapes up and down the mountainside. And he gets the letter, but also his brother shows up, and his brother's like, "Dude, what are you doing?" Basically,
don't be an idiot.
Like, yeah, stop being an idiot. Go to her. She's
Well,
obviously cares about you. You care about her. Go do something about it, type of thing.
Well, and it's a great contrast to see the letter that she wrote to him, especially with the context from the original series, because she wrote him letters while, because she didn't know whether he was dead or just MIA or what, but she wrote him letters that were just like military status reports at the beginning.
Okay.
And so it's a very, it shows just how much character growth she's had, comparing the original letters that she wrote to the Major versus the letter that she ultimately delivered, or had delivered to him. And so that shows immense emotional character growth on her part, the words that she is able to use to express her own emotions.
Yeah. Well, and I can see that hitting even harder if I'd watched the series ahead of this. But it's such a great moment. And then you get him, the classic, I'm going to run after the boat type of deal, which, again, my goofball mind had like, oh, he's going to trip and fall down this hill at some point. And then he did.
and then he did.
Which was great, because I was so emotionally devastated by this point in the movie that I needed some levity to, like, just lift me up for a second. So that cracked me up. But then they have their big moment in the water. She dives off the damn boat. Like, that was, I wasn't expecting that for some. I knew somehow they were going to get together, but I didn't expect her to just run and jump right off the back of the boat.
Well, and I sat there thinking, I'm like, is she gonna sink with those metal arms?
Right.
Like, how's she gonna swim? Oh man, because her arms, it's it's somewhere between the elbow and the shoulder
Yeah.
where both of them are cut off at. So
Mhm.
like I can't imagine swimming would be very easy in those. Plus, with how thick her outfit is,
Oh
once
yeah.
that's waterlogged. So
You're going.
it's a physics miracle that she was able to swim over
She is
to
a
him.
strong swimmer, is what we'll say. She is
Yep.
a very strong swimmer. But they have their moment, and he asks her to stay. And one of the things at the beginning of the movie was that Violet was, she had stopped being a doll and just sort of disappeared. And now we know
Yeah.
kind of, we basically have the broad idea of how that happened. She went to the island to be with the major and do her thing there and be with
Yeah.
him. That was the ultimate kind of uh capper for her journey.
Well, and I do wonder. It never actually really answers this because it does say she took over the postal service on the island.
Mhm.
Um, but I almost wonder, did she really stop being a doll altogether, or did she stop being a doll for the CH company? Because I I would guess that even if it was a lot less frequent, because I doubt she traveled anywhere to
Right.
continue her doll service, but I wouldn't be surprised if she continued in a much lower capacity as a doll on the island, um, with these kids. And it also wouldn't surprise me if she helped teach some of these kids to read and write on this island, because I think that would have been a nice um, circle to that story where Gilbert had taught her early on to read and write. And it actually, when was it in the movie when she goes and visits the major's boat, because they're selling it?
Yes. Yes.
So the book that she picks up and takes home with her from the boat is actually the same book that it shows in the series of her learning to read.
Okay.
um and so it meant a lot to her to get that exact book
Yeah.
from the boat. And so i I love it for what it is, and part of me wishes that they had done another special on top of it to answer some of the, like, almost like an epilogue special afterwards. um I wouldn't even mind another side story about some of the other dolls, because in the movie it doesn't really show them hardly at all, the other dolls,
Mhm.
but you get somewhat attached to them in the series. But you don't, they don't progress. They are side stories. Like, you don't see them progress. You do see the one become a playwright, and that's the only progression that really happens. Whereas like Iris, the entire time in the series, has this inferiority complex because Violet and Catlia are the ones that are always requested to be dolls. So you don't see them progressing. You don't see some of the other side interests happening. For instance, I'm blanking on her name. The one that became the playwright, she had a crush on Benedict, the one that was with
Oh.
Iris in the hospital. But that kind of went away when she became a playwright. Like, so there was a lot of unanswered questions. But I love it for what it was, and the movie. The movie needed to end where it ended. I'm not saying that it needed more to the movie. I just would have loved a little bit more of a continuation. Um, I think the only real changes that I would have made to the movie is when Daisy goes to visit the island and ends up at the post office, she talks to the postal worker. And it's heavily implied that the postal worker is a descendant of Violet. Because this is like 50, 60 years later.
Sure.
So
Yep.
it's assumed that Violet is gone. If she wasn't gone, she'd be 70, 80-year-old woman.
Right.
Um, and so it's implied that the postal worker is her son or grandson. It never outright says it, but that thumbs up that he gives
Right.
is something that Violet had learned from Ulysses. And so I wish it had confirmed that that truly was her son or grandson.
Mhm.
And the other thing is the promotional material. I really, really wish that the Major was not featured on the poster, because at least even when you pull it up in Netflix, he's featured on the artwork there, and that because that is such a huge theme of is he or is he not alive in the series,
Mm.
and then when it gets to the movie, it's like, oh no, he's alive, he's just there. And I mean, you can pretty early on you can assume that it's him when it shows him on the island with the boys and things like that. It never outright says that it's him until later, but it that's one thing, because it was the way that the anime portrayed it. That was this big mystery.
Okay.
I haven't actually read the source material, but from what I'm told, it wasn't like that in the series. It was assumed that he was alive in the source material.
Oh,
So that
really?
was something the anime had changed. Um, and so the underlying um, themes and are a little bit different, apparently, between the source material and the anime, where the anime, the big theme is is coming to terms with needing to move on, where and dealing with that longing and that loneliness of missing that person,
Mhm.
whereas the themes in the source material, I'm told, are very much um how am I going to find him type of things while continuing to live my life.
Oh, okay. That is quite different. It makes sense then why that would be something that would stick out. For me, in this movie standalone, the fact that he was still alive, I was like, okay, so no, he's there, and this is her finding him, and that's her journey. So I kind of it didn't that didn't bug me. But if it was such a thing in the anime of like, is he or isn't he alive, I can see where that would play a little different. Um,
Yeah.
I mean, on the whole, uh, this is really an intriguing character study that I feel like the more I learn about it and the more I sort of sit with it, the better it gets. I was a little unsure at first. It was one of those movies where I'm like, this looks really good. And the music, too. The music is fantastic throughout, just
Yeah.
amazing. So you had this wonderful visuals, wonderful music. It's worth watching just for that. And story wise, I was like, I don't really know what's going on. And I was slowly able to piece things together, but it made me interested in like, okay, if this is the end of this woman's journey, I want to kind of go back and
What are
watch
the
some
other
more of it.
arcs?
What are some other things that she did to get her to this point? Um, so for that alone, I think it's kind of worth checking out. And again, it's not a like multiple seasons, huge investment to have to get into. So it might be
Yeah, it's
something.
not One Piece.
Right. Exactly. I did clip a couple of things because it's not it's not like a quotable, quippy movie in any way. But there was a couple of moments that did get me. Let's see. This one, I think. Well, I'm just gonna play it and we'll see what it was.
Do you want us to go with you?
I'm going to be okay. I want you to eliminate worrying about me, feeling sorry for me, and being overprotective of me from within yourself.
So that was her kind of parroting what Eurus had said to her, a little bit of like not wanting people to have those feelings about him as he's in the hospital, like he's tired of feeling that. And so for her to then say that, and there again at this point I'm still thinking, is she android? Like what is that? Because
Well,
it's
and
so
yeah, because she says
clinical.
it, but knowing the military background, it makes
Hmm.
very sense.
It
Even the
does.
term eliminate,
Yes.
like it's very finite. Like this is how it almost like an order to them to stop worrying about her.
Yeah. And it also like adds to knowing the military aspect of it, also adds to like the reactions from the president, which I love how especially anime that I've watched will do that, where somebody has a title or a relationship, you just refer to them as that. Like the little kid referring
Yeah.
to their older brother as just brother is a
Yep.
thing in these series that I always just love. Like I don't know anybody Like, I don't go to my sister and just call her sister ever. I
Yeah.
don't think I've ever done
Well,
that without
and
being a
in
doofus.
Japanese culture, there's a lot less emphasis on first names in general.
That's true.
When most people refer to each other by their last names, their family names, their given names, and it shows, at least in Japanese culture, it shows a degree of familiarity if you are using their first name, especially with. I mean, I watched it dubbed, so they don't really use honorifics in the dub. But if you refer to someone with their first name without honorifics, that shows a level of intimacy in the language that English just doesn't have. American culture doesn't have that facet. And so it didn't really play a huge role here, but with that referring to people by their titles thing, it makes a lot of sense from a Japanese culture standpoint
This is
to
true.
refer to people as their title instead of using their name.
Yeah, that's a good point. And it just because I do watch anime, but I don't watch it a ton. So every time I come back to it, it's like, oh, that's right, that's a thing. You know, for them to call him president all the time. So, but I really liked that. Let's see this one here.
That horrible device comes in handy sometimes.
There it was. That's
Yep,
Iris.
that's the one that I was talking about when after she got the phone call between Luca and Julius, or you. Oh man, it was just oh yeah, so heart wrenching. But it's such it speaks volumes to how good the story is in the amount of emotion that it can evoke in the audience.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
So
And for
good.
me, having nothing of a background for it at all to get that level of emotion from something tells that is well written and well executed. I got a couple more. This
Yeah.
one here.
So you really understand then how other people feel?
So that was one where again I'm like, well, yeah,
And that's the brother, right? Isn't that he Dietfried said
that's
that?
Dietfried saying that. And now kind of learning a little bit more and sort of knowing some more background, it makes more sense why he would say that to her. Because my initial thought while I'm watching this when he says that, I was like, yeah, it's called empathy, dude. It's the thing people do. Like, but it makes sense that he of all people would question that in her.
Yeah. Well, because it's a very human thing to think of a person as how they are the last time you saw them.
Yes.
So like for instance, my niece, I haven't seen her in 5-10 years, and from an intellectual standpoint, I've seen pictures of her and her family on Facebook. I know what she looks like nowadays, but in my mind's eye, I still see her before she ever got married, because that's the last time I had consistent interactions with her in
Right.
person.
Yep.
And so with Dietfried, his snapshot of Violet is basically when he handed her over to Gilbert, when she was still this feral child that he was handing off to be used as a tool of war. And so
Yeah. And
yeah.
and learning that it makes what he said there make a lot more sense. But I captured it because I was like, eh? And then it sort of as I went along and figured things out, gave it more context.
Yep.
Let's
I
see.
I just love how realistic the entire thing is, the human emotions, the interplay between characters, and it's done really really well. I almost wonder if the creator had thought about showing more PTSD with Violet, and I'm glad that they didn't, because of her lack of emotion, I don't think she would realistically suffer from an overt amount of PTSD, at least the way that media traditionally shows PTSD.
Yeah.
Because obviously there the human mind is multifaceted and PTSD can show up in a lot of different ways in real life, but the way that media generally portrays it, she wouldn't have that classic form of PTSD. And so I really love how thought out, how well rounded, and how realistic all of the characters are.
Yeah, and the big thing is that it feels that way. It feels very realistic and how people would act, and I kind of liked that.
Yep.
Couple more here. This one.
I am pleased to make your acquaintance. If it is your wish, I will travel anywhere to meet your request. Auto Memories doll at your service. Violet Evergarden.
And that was where I'm like, okay, she's an android. Like that's just it confused me, but then Iris does kind of a similar thing a little bit later, and she acts very differently from Violet, and so that's where I was like, okay, this is just sort of a practiced greeting that they do.
Yep.
But it was a great moment.
Well, and it's interesting because in the series there's one time where they initially turned down a request to meet up with someone because it's in an area that still has parts of, even though the war is officially ended, it still has some rebel skirmishes going on. And so the president's like, no, we're not going there. But Violet completely disobeys and is like, I need to get out there. And so she very much lives up to, I will go anywhere to fulfill my duty, even when the president is telling her no.
Wishes.
Some wishes don't come true no matter how much you want them to. What should you do about those?
Cry about them, because that was one that got me. Like that was kind of the turning point for me with Violet when she said that. Was my turning point for her character of like, oh no. So that was really well done. It's just, I can't say enough about how well written the characters are for a thing that I didn't have any connection to.
Yeah, well, and it's so well received. Even like I looked up the Rotten Tomatoes score for it, and Rotten Tomatoes, the critics give it a 100%, and the audience gives it a 99%.
Wow.
And that's reflected in it's one. It got nominated for 6 different awards and won 4 of those awards as well. And so this is a beautiful masterpiece, and any issues I have are little nitpicks to
Sure.
something that is just it's gorgeous. And I do understand this type of storytelling is not for everybody, especially a lot of people, like my mother-in-law for instance. If it doesn't have action in it, she doesn't really care. And so this would not be for her, but from a just pure storytelling standpoint, it is so well done. It is gorgeous.
It is. And if anything, what confused me throughout it was just not having context of what was happening, where
Yep.
it gave me the feel that like there's more in this story that I just don't know. And so I just kind of have to run with it. But what it did was it made me want to know more, and knowing that there is more story that I can watch, I want to seek that out. I want to watch that.
Well, and there actually is another movie.
Okay.
But as far as for context for this movie,
mm-hmm.
that one is completely skippable, to be honest. It doesn't reference that movie at all in this one. So, but yeah, the series, those 13, 14 episodes, plus this movie, just, I mean, the other movie was really good too, but it is from a story standpoint very skippable.
And one thing I will say about this, I haven't really mentioned it yet, but this isn't a short movie. I was surprised to see it was 2 hours and 20 minutes. And
especially for an animated feature, that's a long movie.
Yeah, and it does move along. It paces itself well for the type of story that it's telling. And so while it still does feel a little bit long, at the same time, I kind of get it. And so that didn't bother me at all. I was just surprised when I started it. I'm like, wow, 2 hours and 20 minutes for an animated film. That's okay, sure.
Yep. Just
But
make sure you've got some tissues with you, because
yeah, just be ready.
there are some serious tearjerker moments, and during the series too, especially episode 10. That one
Well, I
will
can
get you.
imagine if this one story in this film got me where it did, that if you're taking this and you're stretching it out over multiple episodes where I get to build a relationship with these characters as they're going, I can imagine that being very emotionally I don't devastating, I guess would be the word, but
Moving.
moving. There you go. Emotionally moving. And the series Violet Evergarden and then this movie Violet Evergarden, the movie, are available on Netflix. So if you got a
Yep.
Netflix account, check them out. I recommend it. I thought it was a really good choice. It was not. I had no expectations going in this, and this definitely defied any that I would have had. Um, but again, it's because anime is not a genre; it is just a medium of storytelling, and you can tell any kind of story in there. And that's one of the things I love about exploring things outside of my comfort zone. Is not just watching something animated, which I do enjoy, or anime, but doing a different type. Like a lot of the anime that I grew up watching is very action oriented, right? I was in the era of Vampire Hunter D and original, Cowboy Bebop and Outlaw Star and those kinds of things. Um, Yu Yu Hakusho, and it's like action, action, action. And this isn't that, but it's that same medium, and I love seeing that. It's like watching growing up on Disney musicals, and then watching something from Ralph Bakshi, where it's like this is animation, but it's a very different type of animation. And so I love that. I love kind of broadening my horizons and checking out something new. So thank you for getting me to watch this, because it's not one I can tell you right now. I wouldn't just be scrolling through Netflix and think Violet Evergarden the movie. Sure, let's check that out. Like that wouldn't grab me, but somebody saying, "Hey, you should watch this," was absolutely worth watching. So thank you for that.
Yep. And Charles McFall, our mutual friend, he was like, I don't know how much anime Travis watches. And so I'm like, I'm gonna pick an anime and I'm gonna make sure it's a really good anime. And so I had a couple of different ones that I was thinking of. Because I mean, when you think anime movies, you think Studio Ghibli off the bat. And so I picked this one largely because it wasn't Studio Ghibli, because everybody, oh
Oh,
well,
I
not
love
everybody,
those.
but a lot of people, when they think anime movies, they think Studio Ghibli, which rightfully so. Studio Ghibli has some amazing things that they've put out, and their voice casting is top notch actors, especially for the dubs. I assume it's same for the Japanese, but the Japanese voice actors, but the English dubs have top tier actors like Liam Neeson, Christian Bale,
Oh yeah.
a ton of
Oh yeah.
ones.
Love them.
But I knew I wanted to pick an anime that would resonate and showcase some of the best parts of anime that isn't necessarily the, like you said, people think anime, they think like Dragon Ball Z, they think One Piece, they think a lot of these shonen type ones. And so I wanted something was that would move the heart instead of just being a fighting one. So
Yeah.
um
Yeah, this was the
and I
thing
think,
that did it. Moved me emotionally, but it never like hit me with an adrenaline burst.
yep.
So it did all of its work was on the emotional level, and I appreciate that quite a bit. So an excellent choice, because our other mutual friend Phil Keating also said the same thing. He's like, "Oh, he's going to make you watch anime. I wonder which one he chose." Um, and but it was great. Like it was a lot of fun. So thank you for bringing that to me. Now you've mentioned Wise and Nerdy earlier.
Yes. Yeah, so our mutual friend Charles McFall and I do a podcast called Wise and Nerdy, I guess subtitled "Where Fatherhood Meets Fandom," where we talk about everyday life. We talk about nerddoms. We talk about a wide variety. It's a variety show, a wide variety of things, from our experiences in life in general, especially as fathers. But then we always talk about something that we are nerding out about. And a couple episodes back, I mentioned Violet Evergarden because I
Mhm.
had watched it with my wife, and I mentioned that I would be, if they wanted to know more, to pop over here, that I'd be coming on Wait You Haven't Seen to do a deeper dive into Violet Evergarden. So
Excellent. Well, Wise and Nerdy, you've had me on that show, even though I'm not a dad. I'm a, as you put, a faux pas. But it's a great show, so definitely check that out. And yeah, where can people find Wise and Nerdy?
You can go to wiseandnerdy.com,
Okay.
or if you just search Google wise and nerdy, or even just wise and nerdy, we're going to be among the top things. We live stream every Thursday night at 8:30 p.m. Eastern on YouTube, on our Wise and Nerdy channel. And if you want to get a sample of it, if you're not sure if you want to invest the entire time into a full episode, because they are usually about an hour and a half long, we have a WNN clips on YouTube as well, where I go through our recordings and I clip it up into smaller segments that range from anywhere from 1 minute, depending on the segment, to a half an hour or so if it's one of the longer segments.
Excellent.
So you can give us a sample over there and see if it's your cup of tea.
Perfect. Check that out. Wise and Nerdy. It's a great show. Joe, thank you so much for being here. This was super fun. We'll do this again for sure. And I can't wait to hang out at Dragon Con again this year.
Oh yeah, thanks for having me. This was a blast.
Excellent. Well, if you enjoy this show, I record Sunday nights, 8 p.m. Eastern time here, twitch.tv/TV's Travis, or youtube.com/@TV's Travis Live. Then it comes out as a podcast, audio form anywhere you get your podcasts, video form on YouTube every Wednesday. It's usually in the morning. So subscribe and you get every episode. My website has links to all the audio, the video, as well as merchandise and Patreon. Patreon is what lets me go to things like Dragon Con or TMS Vegas, where I'll be doing the show live again. I just actually scheduled what I'm going to be doing and who it's with for that. So that's coming up at the end of April in Las Vegas. I'm going to be with Steven Adams, and I'm going to have him watch Smokin' Aces for the first time, and I can't wait because I love that movie. We've been talking about it, so that's going to happen at Vegas. So things like that are made possible by patrons. Patreon.com/WYHS. You also get things like my first watch diaries. I just wrapped up watching The Fall of the House of Usher, and I've been watching an episode, giving my thoughts on it for 10 or 15 minutes. And I just finished that up. It'll be hitting the feed this week, the final episode of that. So definitely check that out. And that's only for patrons. So you have to subscribe to get that. Now, next week, I've got Anthony Vito coming on the show. And,
oh, nice.
We're going to watch Sonic the Hedgehog, the first one.
Oh, okay.
I did go see this in the theater a few years ago. But Anthony hasn't seen it, so we're going to watch that and talk about it. I can't wait. It's going to be a lot of fun.
That'll be a lot of fun. Anthony's a fun guest. He's been on Wise and Nerdy before as well. So yeah.
Yep, met him for the first time this past Dragon Con, and danced around getting him on the show. Finally nailed it down. So that's going to be next week. So definitely come back and check that out. And as always, if you can rate and review the show on your favorite podcast player, it does help the show as well. So I do appreciate that, and I just appreciate you listening to the show. So thank you so much. Thank you, Joe, for being here. We'll do this again for sure. Maybe next time I'll bring you a movie that you haven't seen.
Sounds fun.
All right. Until next time, just remember to enjoy your movies, go on your emotional journeys, and be excellent to each other. There's been Wait You Haven't Seen.
Why, hello there.
Are you someone's father?
No.
So who are you then? You're creepy.
I love those kids. These kids were great.